transient length haircut is a longer, layered shape, point cut for texture. A profile parting is taken from the centre of the forehead to the centre of the nape. Radial partings are taken from the crown to the top of the ears, separating the back sections from the front. A pivoting radial section is taken from the crown to the nape. With the head upright, the section is combed to 90 degrees at the crown to over-directed beneath this. The line is point cut visually, starting shorter at the crown to longer at the perimeter. Pivoting radial sections are continued around the back of the head. Subdivide the previously cut section to use as a guide. Comb the hair up to 90 degrees at the crown to over-directed beneath. The line is point cut from short to long. The last pivoting radial section, behind the ear, is over-directed back and up to maintain weight and length. It is point cut following the guideline. The opposite side is sectioned in exactly the same way and the technique repeated. The key difference being the line is cut from the perimeter to the crown instead of from the crown to the perimeter. The balance is cross-checked before continuing. Working in front of the radial parting, a pivoting radial section is taken from the crown through to the hairline at the side in front of the ear. This section is over-directed up and back to a stationary guideline behind the ear to maintain length and weight in front. The guideline is followed, point cutting from short to long. Pivoting radial sections are continued until the profile parting is reached, over-directing sections up and back behind the ear, point cutting to follow the guideline. Exactly the same technique is used on the opposite side. Check balance. A profile section is taken approximately ½ inch wide, from the crown to the front hairline. With the head upright, the section is combed to 90 degrees, and, using the pre-existing guide to length at the crown, the hair is point cut at an angle from short to long. Continue to increase in length towards the front. In this case, the existing length is considered suitable. Pivoting radial sections are continued through the sides until the profile parting is reached. Using the inversion technique, standing on the opposite side to the side being cut, all sections are over-directed up to the initial profile section, a stationary guideline. All of the hair that reaches is point cut to follow this guide. The balance is checked before continuing. Exactly the same technique is repeated on the other side. Remember to stand on the opposite side to the side being cut. Cross-check balance. The perimeter is now detailed, keeping the profile parting in place. The hair in the back is combed to natural fall, elevated to 1 finger's depth, and point cut from the centre out. The hair in front of the ear is over-directed back behind the shoulder, and the guideline followed, held at 1 finger's depth, and point cut square. The opposite side is cut in the same way, held at 1 finger's depth, and point cut piecemeal from the centre profile parting to the outside edge. The balance is cross-checked. hair in front of the ear is now combed to natural fall, and, still holding the hair at one finger's depth, the line is checked with point cutting, rounding any excess lengths. The balance is checked from the front before continuing. The sides are personalised with slide cutting. Over-direct all of the hair in front of the ear forward. Elevate to approximately 45 degrees away from the face, and, using the scissors like a razor, slide cut from the lip area down to the existing perimeter length. Use exactly the same technique on the opposite side, only this time stand behind the shoulder instead of in front. This will allow greater control of the line being cut. Check balance. Because of the model's natural curl, we wanted to show the hair styled two ways. One with the diffuser used to enhance the curl, and the other power dried and styled with a round brush for volume and texture. Our model's hair was coloured using an alternative half-head technique, which can be viewed on our classic colouring series. Transient length recap. Back and sides. Partings and sections are pivoting radials. Distribution moves from 90 degrees at the crown to over-directed beneath. Elevation also moves from 90 degrees to over-directed. And the cut is visual, from short to long. Top. Partings and sections move from profile into pivoting radials. Distribution moves from 90 degrees to over-directed. Elevation moves from 90 degrees to over-directed. And the cut is visual, from short to long. Perimeter. Partings and sections are profile. Distribution is natural fall in the back to over-directed through the sides. Elevation moves from one finger's depth at the back to a stationary 45 degrees at the side. And the line is point cut through the back and slide cut through the sides. Personalising is an essential part of the Toni and Guy philosophy. Texturising techniques are used to adapt classic shapes to suit the individual. On the last video in this series, we introduced techniques such as point cutting, slicing, brick cutting and razoring, which expand the classic portfolio to accommodate all lengths and textures of hair and allow the stylist to develop their creativity for the benefit of the client. The transient cut is a commercial mid-length look that is based on softness and versatility. A natural parting is taken from the front hairline and brought diagonally back to the profile at the nape. Diagonal forward sections are taken from the profile to the back of the ear, below the occipital. With the head slightly forward, the hair is combed to natural fall, held at 1 finger's depth, and point cut square from the profile to the outer edge. The opposite side is then worked piecemeal, from the profile to the outer edge. Check balance. Diagonal forward sections are taken from above the occipital to the top of the ears. Exactly the same technique is used. The hair is combed to natural fall, elevated to 1 finger's depth, and point cut square to follow the guideline. The hair is worked from wet to dry while point cutting, so that the technique can be controlled to suit the model's natural texture. Check balance. A horseshoe section is taken from below the crown to the recession area. With the head upright, the hair is combed to the natural fall and the guideline in the back followed in the same way. From behind the ear, up towards the jaw, the line is point cut visually, working to a length most suitable to the face shape. In this case, just below the jawline. Exactly the same technique is used on the opposite side. horseshoe sections are continued up the head and point cut in the same way until the natural parting is reached. Check balance. Radial partings are taken from the crown to the top of the ears, separating the back section from the front. With the profile parting in place, a pivoting radial section is taken from the crown to the nape. With the head upright, using the perimeter as a guide to length, the section is combed to 90 degrees and point cut to follow the head shape. Pivoting radial sections are continued and the technique repeated. Point cutting to follow the guideline. The last section is over-directed back to maintain length behind the ear. On the opposite side, exactly the same technique is used. Pivoting radial sections, elevated to 90 degrees, and point cut to follow the round of the head. Remember to over-direct the last section back. Check balance. Working in front of the radial partings, pivoting radial sections are continued. The over-direction of these sections is determined by hair density. In this case, the hair is over-directed back to a stationary guideline behind the ear. Point cut to follow the guide. Repeat this technique on both sides until the natural parting is reached. check balance. Here, the hair has been coloured using a pivot triangle technique, which can be viewed on our classic colouring series. The hair is now blow dried using a combination of power drying and a round brush. After drying, the perimeter around the face is personalised, creating an asymmetric fringe using a combination of point cutting and channeling. Transient cut recap. Perimeter. Partings and sections move from diagonal forward into horseshoe. Distribution is natural fall. Elevation is 1 finger's depth. And the line is point cut square in the back to rounded at the sides. Layers. Partings and sections are pivoting radials. Distribution moves from 90 degrees to over-directed. Elevation moves from 90 degrees to over-directed. And the line is point cut visually, rounded to follow the head. Personalising is an essential part of the Toni and Guy philosophy. Texturising techniques are used to adapt classic shapes to suit the individual. On the last video in this series, we introduced techniques such as point cutting, slicing, brick cutting and razoring, which expand the classic portfolio to accommodate all lengths and textures of hair and allow the stylist to develop their creativity for the benefit of the client. The transient graduation cut combines graduation in the nape with the versatility of a longer top area. A profile parting is taken from the centre of the forehead to the centre of the nape. A horseshoe section is taken from below the crown to the recession area. Keeping the profile parting in place, a slightly diagonal forward section is taken from the centre back of the horseshoe to the nape. With the head upright, the section is slightly over-directed back and elevated to 90 degrees. The line is point cut, decreasing in length from the interior to the perimeter.